And good morning. Welcome to KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM. I'm Lindsey, your host today, filmmaker and voiceover producer, and also volunteer editor, producer here at KGUA in Wallala. We have a great show today lined up talking about food and cooking, the local abundance of the harvest this season with none other but the Veggie Queen, Jill Nussinow. That's coming up in just a moment. She's here with us on Zoom and YouTube. We're live on YouTube, so you can go to the KGUA channel and see us live right now and watch anytime later. We have a couple of announcements first from the Mindanao Health Alliance to start, and also Coast Life Support. They would like to invite the community to celebrate Delivery Day for their first ever mobile health clinic. And the clinic will host the celebration on Thursday, September the 14th from 10 a.m. to 11 a.m. at Mindanao Health Alliance's office in downtown Gualala with a brief toast and more vehicle tour. So call them to find out more information about that. And they're also offering their Matter of Balance course once again. That's up in Point Arena starting September the 26th. This is an 8-week course that's held every Tuesday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. at St. Paul's Community Hall through November 14th. And participants learn how to make changes to reduce the risk of falling and learn exercises to gain strength, balance, and flexibility. It's for people 60 years and older, and you can call to register at 412-3176, area code 707, or send an email info@mindanaohealth.org. Also, Redwood Coast Medical Services has a position to fill. It is a professional one with their behavioral health department. It is the assistant position. And if you want to know more about that, give them a call or send an email to Renee Kosnick at RCMS's Human Resources Department. And that's RKAUCNIK at RCMS healthcare.org, and there's a hyphen in between there. You can call us if you need that email or more information. Now, as far as the calendar goes, we've of course got our farmers markets this weekend again, which are a great way to participate in our local abundance that we're going to be talking about with Jill. Point Arena today from 3 to 6 p.m. in the old pharmacy parking lot, and also tomorrow morning, Saturday, September the 9th, right here in Wallala at the community center on the lawn, and that is from 9:30 to 12:30. Pay and take is next weekend. This weekend, it is Mill Bend Preserve Open House on Saturday from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can learn about the local history at the newly restored Wallala Pioneer Cemetery. I really want to do that one. You can wander the trails through the redwood forest, hear about plans for extending the California Coastal Trail along the upland bluffs and continuing down to the river. It is at Mill Bend off of Old State Highway in Wallala, and you can contact RCLC for more information. Also this weekend, the annual excellent fun thing to do, a theater variety show called Dragon's Breath Theater, and it's the 24th annual one that is put on by Fred and Cheryl Mittauer along with their cohort, and that is Blake Moore. She's the co-producer, and you can bring your own picnic and blankets. Keep the dogs at home though, and mature children over 13 with parental discretion and guidance is allowed, but it's really more for adults, and profits go to a local nonprofit. Gates open at 5 o'clock and shows begin at 6 o'clock. The address is up Fish Rock Road, just north of Anchor Bay, 44800 Fish Rock Road. And there is a suggested donation there too of $20. Then there is Sunset and Jazz coming up this Thursday, September 14th, with again our saxophonist Harrison Goldberg and the Ian Scherer Group. And that's going to be at the lodge, and Joel Krusick is going to be on acoustic bass. So that is Sunset and Jazz again this Thursday, coming up Thursday. And it is chilly outside right now with lots of mist going on, but it should be clearing up later in the day with the highs around 70. And now I would like to switch gears and start our morning show by introducing our guest, Jill Nussinow, who is called the Veggie Queen. She has many books out. She is a culinary educator, a registered dietitian, and a freelance writer with a master's degree in nutrition and dietetics. She has been teaching cooking classes that focus on healthful, seasonal, and organically grown foods since 1985. And since 1990, she has been teaching culinary classes at Santa Rosa Junior College. She also teaches at cooking schools in Sonoma County and throughout the U.S. She specializes in teaching fast and fresh, healthy cooking with the emphasis on using locally grown vegetables. Good morning, Jill. We're so looking forward to listening to you talk to us today.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it, especially at this time of year, which I call the season of overwhelm.
The season of overwhelm. So explain that.
Well, it's the time of year when a lot of things get harvested and some things that you can't really control so much. Like when you have pears, you have a lot of pears. When you have apples, which are starting, you have a lot of them. And people already know all about the too many zucchini or summer squash, or, it just seems like when a garden goes, it goes, and there's a lot.
Right.
And it's sometimes a lot to deal with. And that's the thing about seasonal food that people don't always understand, but anybody who it becomes part of a harvest, whether they go to the farmer's market or grow something, knows it. You can't just wait. You have to deal with it. And it becomes, yeah.
I was just going to say a friend of mine several friends are part of the Posh Squash and Sea Ranch.
Yeah.
And they are having an overabundance of vegetables and produce. And so that's just this time of year. So she's trying to figure out what to dry, what to can, what to freeze. Right?
I think that's it, and it's interesting because I've taught canning before. Actually, I was a long time ago, a master food preserver for the county of Los Angeles, where nobody did any kind of anything, but I had to learn it all. And I really didn't know how to do this. I wasn't the person who grew up at her grandmother's knee. And if I did, my grandmother didn't can. She lived in an apartment. So I never learned how to do these things as opposed to people who did. So I had to learn all of them. And I literally had to go to the farmer's market in Santa Monica and go buy green beans and then can them. But I was really afraid because green beans are a low acid food. And in order to make it work, you have to do it a very specific way. And I wasn't sure that it was going to work. So I did it. And what I discovered is you don't want to can green beans. First of all, they don't taste good. They're wonderful blanched and frozen, but canned green beans aren't that good. And I was like, nope, this isn't it. And I really learned that different vegetables and fruit need to be treated in different ways.
I do like pickled.
Oh, so I'm really big into fermenting, which is different than pickling. So this is a big thing, is people don't realize that it's not the same. That pickling has to do with usually vinegar, sugar, salt, and water. And fermenting, basically, this is what I say, it has to do with salt, sometimes water, love, and thyme.
Oh.
And so I make dilly beans with green beans, actually any color bean, yellow, purple, green. And that takes anywhere from 5 to 10 days to go through the fermentation process. And there's no vinegar involved.
Really? I like that.
Yeah. So I had to learn how to make pickles at that time, when I was doing the master food preserving, and I learned that it is definitely work. And it was okay. And I liked it. And I've made them many, many times. But really, when I started making dilly beans, which are like pickles, but they are green beans. And this year I did sugar snap peas too, which are amazing. I've done carrots. I taught carrots at the Point Arena Library. And I also did 9 library sessions for Sonoma County. And in each one, I taught people how to ferment carrots. And I think I have a lot of people now who are doing it. And some people will do it once and then say, oh, it was too much trouble. But one of the things is I always have on my dietitian hat. And my dietitian hat is, hey, let's see what we can do to boost the nutrition in your food. And fermenting food actually is great for your microbiome.
For the
And
gut. Yes.
yeah, so eating vegetables is wonderful. I mean, and there are such sad statistics in this country. Only 20% of people are getting the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables every day. That's like, and I'm making up for at least 1 or 2 other people. So I don't know how these numbers really work, but most people aren't getting enough. And what I tell people is eat more vegetables than you think you need.
This is what I need to do. I've been talking with my doctors. We're going to put me in a whole new management plan for, getting healthier for the next year, losing weight, that kind of thing. And eating more vegetables is one of the ways to go. Right?
It is. It absolutely is. And it's really interesting because I have a client right now who she says, well, and she's telling me, she actually literally showed me her pantry. She showed me her freezer. She has everything she needs. But the part she didn't get is that she could cut down on the more calorically dense foods by adding more of the nutritionally dense and lower calorie foods. So she said, oh, I made that mushroom barley, soup, and I added a bunch of green beans. I was like, that is fabulous. And then I said, but you know what you could do to make it even better? If you put depending on the time of year, you could cut up zucchini and put that underneath, or you could add arugula, or you could put a bunch of spinach. And so what you're doing is you're taking the same food, but eating the lighter part and making it fluffier, is what she said, which is kind of what I would say. You're fluffing it up. And so in the summertime, any kind of summer squash is like my fluffer, because you can eat a giant summer squash and really only get 40 calories. And the other stuff is the more nutritionally, it's more calorically dense. And so that's one of the tricks, is just make your food fluffier with vegetables.
I like that concept. I mean, that's something that's visual too.
Yeah.
Fluff it up with vegetables and you don't have more calories, you have less.
Well, yeah, and you can cut down on the size of the portion. One of her big things is portion sizes. Right. And in the US, we tend to have very large portion sizes out of the home. And I think it kind of translates into the home, where we're like, oh yeah, that's the amount that we're supposed to eat. And I have my visual cue, and I have a beautiful ceramic bowl. And that is what I eat. Whatever I can eat out of a bowl, I eat in that bowl. That is my visual cue of how much I'm eating. Now, I don't limit how much I eat. I can eat 1 bowl, and if I still think I'm hungry, I can have another bowl, but I'm very aware of how much. I don't weigh or measure. And, sometimes people at the beginning of some kind of change, weighing and measuring can be so instructive, because the very first step in making any change, whatever it is an assessment, is determining where am I now and how do I change that. So my client was eating 2 cups of that very calorically dense food. And I said, why don't you eat a big salad before you eat? And she said she ate the big salad and then realized, oh, I could eat a cup and a half and still feel good. And now with the fluffing, I'm hoping she can eat 1 cup and still feel really good. So there's many ways to change what we do, but for me, number 1 is eating more vegetables, and I will include 2 other things with the vegetables. And I like to say planet-based foods because it includes sea vegetables and includes mushrooms.
Right.
And neither one of those are plants. I mean, they're sea plants, but we don't think of them that way. So it's pretty easy, but it can be work, because it's not what we've done traditionally. And I think that's the thing. If you look at traditional foods, you will see that they are very different than what people in this country eat as a regular diet, which we call the SAD diet, the standard American diet.
Well, if you're just tuning in, you're listening to Jill Nussinow. She is the Veggie Queen, and that is a title that she has earned. She's an author of several books, one of which is called The New Fast Food. The other one is Vegan Under Pressure, and then also Nutrition Champs. You can find them on Amazon. You can order them in any bookstore. Go ahead, Jill.
They have them at the Four-Eyed Frog, or they should.
Perfect.
Our local bookstore, which always needs support.
And we were talking too about buying local and how important that is, not only for our bodies and our own nutrition, but also for our local community, right?
Right. For the local economy. It's so important. And when I taught at the junior college, I quote unquote retired at the end of 2019 after 30 years. And I got a lot of people to go to the farmers market, which is easier in Santa Rosa only because it's twice a week and it's all year round. But it's easy here because it's not giant and you don't have to fight for parking unless it's a pay and take day. But it's just easy. But it becomes habitual. Like, can I get myself there? And for me, that is my number 1 place to shop, because I know that the food is not only locally grown, but it's very, very fresh. And I encourage people, make friends with a farmer because they need loyal customers. And I clearly see this at the farmers market in Wallala, because you'll see the same people standing in line, if there is a line, waiting to get whatever it is from their farmer. Now, I like to support almost all of them. So I do go around from booth to booth, and I may spend less or more, but I like to spread the money around, although I do have my farmers who are favorites for various things. And I think once you get to know the farm and the farmers, it becomes a relationship. And that relationship is very important, can be very important in your life. And it's definitely important in their life. Because if you even have a little garden, you know how much work it is. And those dedicated people get up really early in the morning to harvest their food, to have it ready for you, to bring it there and sell it to you. And let me tell you, it is work. It is hard work, and work that, I have a little garden and it's work, but they do a lot of really hard, and I would consider almost the most important work. So
why don't we name some of them? We have
farmers.
Yes, go ahead.
Oh, there's Keelan at Wavelength Farm. There's Donna of, I forgot what she called, Bishop Farms. There's Wing, and I don't know what she calls her farm. There's Oz Farm. There's Astrid and Allen. There's the, Donna calls them the Mulligan brothers. They come from Laytonville, and they have mushrooms. Let's see. And there are farmers that, and there's Rio of Nature's Tune Farm, who is my lettuce supplier, because my husband loves his lettuce. And then there's Katrina and Jesse, who I don't support them because I don't eat meat. But if I were going to eat meat, I would buy their meat. and there's Fox with his walnuts and almonds, and I'm going through the whole thing there. And there's also the kombucha guy. And if you're a kombucha fan, and he just started making sauerkraut, so he may have that. But it's an amazing thing when you go there and you get used to shopping that way. You don't have to think, is this in season? It's in season if the farmers have it, you know? So when people are asked, Keelan told me, I saw him at the Fort Bragg Farmers Market earlier in the year, and he says, it was April and people were asking me for tomatoes. And it's like, that's not seasonal. And we see it in the store. So in our mind,
True.
it's in season, but the best tasting, freshest, and most nutritious food is going to be what's in season tomorrow.
That's what I thought last night as I cut up that tomato that a friend gave me from the posh squash, and it was so fresh and I mean completely robust with flavor other than what you get when it's not in season. And I was using that for tacos that I was making last night.
Yeah.
But Alan and Astrid Hogel of The Farm, they actually just call their place The Farm.
Oh, that makes sense.
Right. And Alan, I get an email from him every week, and he lists all the pastries that Astrid makes, which are incredible, but I can't eat those right now. But the other things that he does are sprouts, which I love. And I know you've taught doing sprouts before.
Well, they grow microgreens, which are like sprouts, but a little bit different.
Right.
Yeah. And so they're very related. And I've taught people how to grow microgreens before. It's a very similar process. The difference is microgreens are grown in soil and sprouts are done with water. And so I do sprouts more often because they're easier for me, because bringing soil inside isn't that great for me, and doing it outside doesn't really work. So yeah, and that's a food that is as alive as you can get, whether you sprout or you grow microgreens or you buy them from Astrid and Allen. I mean,
I've done it myself too, you know, like broccoli, little broccoli, microgreens, and all kinds of microgreens that I've grown myself. But when I'm not, then I can just go to the farmer's market and get them there. When we have the farmer's market, how much longer will that be going this year?
I believe it goes till the end of October, and it really depends. I think last year it went almost to Thanksgiving, and it really depends on the weather and the conditions. So in very wet years, it probably ends a little earlier, only because the farmers have less food and it's too muddy, and there's all kinds of things. And this year it was a slow start because it was wet and it was chilly. And you know, this is one of the things that people don't always think about, is how hard it is to farm because of Mother Nature. And I'm sitting here, I'm looking at my apple tree, which last year had hundreds of pounds of apples, and this year has about none. So if I were my Granny Smith farmer, I'd be crying for months and months and months because I would have no crop. And people forget that there's that part behind the farming that it's very unpredictable. And so, I mean, Astrid and Allen are great because Astrid bakes and they grow microgreens, which you can grow. But, you know, every once in a while, there'll be a crop failure. And it's like, uh-oh, what don't we have now? And so I think farmers have to be incredibly creative to make sure that they're covering things like Donna Bishop and her seaweed. You know, she has seaweed products. She also has herbal products, but she has seaweed almost all the time. And she really educates people on why you want to eat it. And its sea vegetables are amazing. In the season, I harvest my own kombu, which Donna also has, which I put a piece of kombu in every pot of beans.
You do?
And I do. It adds minerals and it makes them more digestible. And it's got iodine in it, which many people need. And it's very good for you. And you can't really taste it in there. And it's just wonderful. And one of the things is there's a researcher. He's at Stanford. His name is Christopher Gardner, and he has a very, it's funny. He's
I know, Gardner.
gardener, but he's not a gardener. He's gardening people's health, I think.
Ah,
And he was just talking about what people need to do. And he said, eat more beans. That was one of his big messages, eat more beans. And I think for most people, eating more beans, and when he says beans, he means legumes, beans, peas, and lentils. And it's amazing, and that's like just a small thing that people can do, and they're generally very affordable. So you don't hear people saying, oh, I can't afford, I can't afford salmon, I can't afford fish, I can't afford meat. I don't ever hear anybody saying, I can't afford beans. I mean,
exactly. And we started out talking about your time in Los Angeles when you were canning. And we talked about how you discovered you didn't really particularly like the taste of the canned beans. And then how you told me about fermenting the beans.
Right.
So I wanted to circle back to
Yeah.
that and what you were doing when you were talking about canning in Los Angeles. We kind of went down the path of fermentation.
Well, because I had to learn how to do everything. I had to learn how to can, I learned how to ferment, and I learned how to dehydrate. Those were three big things that I had to learn that I knew nothing about. And so what I learned is, like, canning applesauce is wonderful, right? You have an abundance of apples, and I think I'm actually going to make pear sauce and can that. And it's water bath canning. It's very easy. All you need is a big pot and some water and some guidelines as for how long. And then you just get the jars and lids and seal them. It's wonderful. But pressure canning is a whole different thing. And that is for low acid vegetables. And, the reason people canned was to preserve what they had. And so they could can, or they could ferment, or they could pickle, right? If you pickle, you can still can and keep them, and they will keep a very long time. The ferments, once they're in the refrigerator, don't keep forever. They have limited time, right? So people didn't have freezers then, so they needed to can. But once they had freezers, the freezer is a much better way to preserve, because you blanch and you stop the enzymes from going, and then you put the food in your freezer and you pull it out when you need it. And so it's a way to have fresher food all the time, and it doesn't take a whole lot of work.
You're listening to Jill Nussinow, who is a culinary educator, a registered dietitian, and a freelance writer with a master's degree in nutrition and dietetics. I'm Lindsey, your host today on KGUA in Wallala 88.3 FM. We do stream worldwide at kgua.org. So anybody with internet, we have a web app that pops up. You can save it to any device. And also we are live on YouTube right now. So if you want to watch this show later, you can do that. And what I'd like to do now, Jill, is get into some of your cooking, because that's one of the things you excel at. And we all like to know what are some easier, maybe, but healthy ways to cook our meals every day.
Well, you already know I'm really into pressure cooking. I was into pressure cooking before the Instant Pot, and I'm sure that when I lived in Santa Rosa, people were like, there's that crazy pressure cooker lady.
My mother did too, though, since we were little kids.
But your mother had a pressure cooker that went.
Yes.
Okay, the newer pressure cookers came out in the mid to later 80s, and they didn't do that. And so they couldn't explode, which was really due to people.
Yes, she got those later on.
Yep. People making mistakes. with their pressure cooker, not being patient enough, which I think is an American trait, is lack of patience. But the Instant Pot changed things for so many people because, like right now, I could be making stock while I'm talking to you because my pressure cooker could be going. And they have like a it doesn't require me. It requires me if I'm cooking vegetables because I need to stop the pressure cooking so I don't have green mush. But if I'm cooking something like stock, and I make vegetable stock almost every week, I save the ends and pieces of a lot of my vegetables and they go into my pressure cooker with a bay leaf or two. And I'm not talking California bay, I'm talking true bay. California bay is not a culinary bay, even though
I've
a lot of
heard
people
this.
use it.
Yes.
And I'll often put a piece of kombu in my stock or a leftover piece from when I've been doing my beans.
The seaweed. Now that's a
The
type of
seaweed.
seaweed.
It's a kelp and it is thick and hearty. And it adds what's called umami flavor, that fifth flavor. And it also adds minerals to the stock. So I'll add that, and I just basically cover my ends and pieces that I have. And if I'm not at home, I'm traveling, I put it in the freezer and then I take it out and I use it. So the ends of carrots, the ends of green beans, the ends of zucchini, you can't keep the zucchini too long because it breaks down. But, you know, if you're going to do it within a week, it's usually fine. Celery. And then there's things I don't put in. I don't put in any cruciferous vegetable. I say any, but not a lot of cruciferous vegetables like kale, collards, cabbage, kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, broccoli. I don't put a lot of those in because they have a sulfur component and it can make your stock stinky. So I mostly rely on those other things. And in my book, Vegan Under Pressure, I have a great chart on like what to put in your stock, what to put a little in, and what to usually not put in, so you can make it. And so those cans and boxes, I don't buy them. I make my own. If I have too much, I freeze it in ice cube trays. So that, yeah, if you need a quarter cup of stock, I just take out 2 cubes and then I use those. I don't have to open. See, this is what happens in the US. You know, we get a box of that stock, we use half of it, and then what happens? It gets tossed, right? So I freeze it. If I were to buy it, I'd freeze it in ice cube trays and then just label it. And when I need the rest, I can just defrost it and use it.
So talk about some of the things that you use stock in.
Oh, I cook with stock when I can, instead of water. If I'm going to use it, like for, let's say I'm going to cook vegetables in my Instant Pot, I use stock instead of water. I use it in all my soups. I use a lot of stock. But I use it mostly for soup. You can use it for stews. You can use it for anything that requires liquid that you want to add a little more flavor.
And you're also adding to your nutrition.
Absolutely, because I say stock is the one place that you're going to stop before compost. So you're taking something that you might ordinarily throw away and you're turning it into something that the nutrition is getting out of it into your stock. And
so you're leveraging what you buy and extending that purpose.
All of it.
Right?
All of it. You know, I was looking at vegetables the other day and I was thinking, people don't often, like, I'm not a big fan of carrot top pesto, and I have tried. And I'm like, there's some things I'm willing to do and there's other things I'm not willing to do. But to cut the ends off an onion and turn that into stock, I love that.
Right, because they're so long. Like I got some leeks the other day, just had these long ends on.
So here's what I'm going to tell you about leeks. I love leeks. If they have very long parts, those long parts are totally usable. You can cut them up. You can put them in your food. And if you don't want to do that, you can turn them into stock, which is wonderful. The end of the leek, the root end, You just cut that off. That goes in your stock. But I was cutting green onions, and I was thinking a lot of people don't use the green part.
I know.
Always
I
use
love
the
the green
green
part.
part. They're
Yes.
delicious,
Yes.
right? And so I was eating something and I was like, what is that? It's so tasty. And what I realized, it was they're called spring onions or fresh onions. It was the tops of the fresh onions, and they still had some texture, unlike what happens with the green onions that get kind of soft. This still had some texture, and I was like, what is that? What is that? I could tell it was an allium, which is one of the letters in Nutrition Champs, is alliums, which you want to include every day: onions, garlic, leeks, shallots, chives. And so this was the top, and it was delicious. And then I thought, oh, I probably can't get any more spring onions because we're past that season, but I'm going to remember for next time. And I got them from Wing, and she was like, she had green onions and she had these onions, and she said, you should get those. And see, this is the joy of having a relationship with the people you buy the food from, because they'll give you little tips and hints and say, oh yeah, this one's a little fresher, get this one, or this is more tender, or this has more flavor, or whatever it is. And I've heard the mushroom guys do this.
Oh, they do.
Oh, they're like, this is not an oyster mushroom, this is an elm mushroom, and this is this, and this is that. And, we have a big mushroom season here wildly, but it's wonderful that they cultivate these mushrooms and bring them, and people can buy them and eat them. And, they have the one called lion's mane, which is really good for your brain. And I've done talks at Sonoma County Mycological Association, SOMA mushroom camp, many years. Wow. And I talk about mushrooms and your health. And I'm a huge believer in the benefit. But when I researched lion's mane, it turns out one of the benefits of lion's mane is actually for your gut. And, our gut and our brain are connected. So it makes sense, right? We're saying it's good for your brain. Well, it's good for your gut. So it's good for your body. And we try to separate out, oh, this is good for your heart. This is good for your eyes. This is good for it's good for you.
And how are some of the ways to cook those mushrooms? And which of the mushrooms are the best for you besides lion's mane?
They're all good for you. Every single mushroom, doesn't matter whether they're white or brown, or the rule in food is the darker the color, the more antioxidants and nutrition it has. So the more colored ones are better for you, but you always want to cook your mushrooms. You don't want to eat them raw. And everyone is always like, what? I've eaten raw mushrooms.
Me too.
Well, definitely don't eat wild raw mushrooms unless you know what you're doing. But cooking is the best way, because mushrooms contain a compound called chitin. And chitin is an indigestible compound that's found in the shells of crustaceans. And it actually can help lower your cholesterol, and it's hard to digest. So you want, and you're not eating the shells of crustaceans generally, and it's grasshoppers and palmetto bugs and all kinds of crazy things that we're not eating. But it's in mushrooms, and you really need to cook them to make them more digestible. So they should be well cooked. They can be pressure cooked. They can be sauteed well. They can be stir fried. They can be any way you want to cook them. And what I do is I cook a lot of them, and you're not going to be surprised by this. And then I put them in the freezer.
No kidding. Mushrooms cooked in the freezer.
In mushroom season,
I just learned something.
When mushrooms are really abundant, you have to do something with them. And the other thing I do with them is I dehydrate them. Last year was a huge porcini year.
Yes.
So Boletus edulis, they were everywhere. And so what do you do with them? You've got to do something. I made mushroom stock. I did a lot of sauteing. I did a lot of dehydrating, but they're in my freezer. And when I need them, and this is key when you freeze things, which is why I love my ice cube trays, you want to freeze in the amounts that you're going to use. I learned this when I love roasted red peppers. And every year in the fall, I would get red peppers and I'd go out to the grill and I'd roast and roast and roast. And the first year I froze them in 1-quart Ziploc bags. And what I learned is you don't want a quart of roasted red peppers. So then what I would do is I'd take each pepper and I'd wrap it and I'd put it in the Ziploc bag. Or, you freeze them in small bags, whatever you're going to use. And this goes for beans, it goes for rice, it goes for stock, it goes for coconut milk, whatever's in my freezer has to be in an amount I'm going to use.
Do you put them in any kind of stock, or is it just the roasted peppers right into the freezer?
Right into the freezer.
Right into the freezer. So small amounts wrapped up and then in the bag or in smaller bags.
Or smaller bags or a glass container, whatever works in your freezer.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah, because we're all trying to reduce plastic at the same time.
Yep.
So we're trying to figure out how to do that with freezing.
You can wrap them in parchment and put them into, I have glass containers with snap-on lids. You can put them in those. Those freeze. Anything that you freeze, it has to say oven proof, freezer proof, freezer safe, and they can just all go in the freezer and stack.
So going back to some recipes, we're listening to Jill Nussinow, who is a culinary educator, registered dietitian, freelance writer. She's got a lot of books, Vegan Under Pressure, Nutrition Champs, The New Fast Food. You can find them on Amazon. I'm Leigh and Lindsey. This is KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM. And Jill, I just love hearing about different ways to cook. I do enjoy cooking. I've got to cook more healthy versions of my meals. And I think a lot of us do.
So my most recent, and I'm actually doing a cooking demo through Zoom on Sunday for the Sierra Club in Massachusetts, of all places. And I'm going to make something that I've made many, many times this summer, and I make it every summer. And it's called Creamy, Dreamy Zucchini Chowder. Ooh. And it is very easy to make. I do it in the pressure cooker. You don't have to. I have to tell the truth. I've never done it on the stovetop, so I don't know how long it would take, but I'm going to guess maybe 20 minutes. And it uses a few unusual ingredients. Zucchini is not the unusual ingredient. It has onions and garlic. And then I add red lentils. And when I made the recipe, I ground the red lentils in my spice grinder or blender, but you don't have to. You just cook it a minute longer under pressure. And I add almond flour, and this is so funny. I mean, I did the book a while ago, and I just realized that when you add the almond flour and you add the stock, you are in essence making your own almond milk. In the soup. Yes. And then you use as much squash as you want, which is usually a lot.
Which is usually available when you've got garlic, because zucchini
is available. Prolific,
right.
Your friend will have one, somebody will have one.
Yep.
Or you just buy it. And then
farmer's market.
Yeah. And then I add stock, but not a lot. It's like 4 cups of squash and 1 cup of stock. And I've been adding, it has basil, and I've been adding like the basil stems in when I cook the soup. And then I put it under pressure for, if I haven't ground the lentils, which I haven't been doing lately, 5 minutes. And then I let the pressure come down. And then I take out my immersion blender and I blend it right in the pot. And I add nutritional yeast and more basil, and then usually salt and pepper. And that's it. And it comes out really
delicious.
Oh, it's so delicious. It's so funny. I made it. A friend gave me literally a baseball bat size zucchini. And I thought, I can't use this. But it turned out it was actually edible, which it isn't always. If you can't cut it with a knife, don't eat it. Just cut it.
It's like woody kind of texture.
Oh, this was fine though.
Yeah.
Which was surprising. So I used that, and I made
how small do you cut it into?
Well, I cut it into chunks and then I cut it into pieces. They can be fairly large, like maybe, 1 inch cube. They
Okay.
don't have to be that small because they're
Oh,
under pressure.
yeah.
So, yeah. So then you just blend it. And I had made it and I was like, oh, what am I going to eat? And the jar was in the refrigerator. And I'll give you another tip. Air ruins food. So if you have a big jar and it's only half full, that food is going to go bad quicker than if you had the smaller jar and it's really full. Okay. So I had it in the fridge and I thought, oh yeah, I guess I'll eat my zucchini chowder. And I ate it and I was like, oh, this is so good. I'd put a lot of basil in. It was really flavorful. And I thought, oh, I should eat this more often. Well, my husband likes it, but he doesn't love it. He loves split pea soup. So I make a lot of split pea soup, usually once a week, once every 2 weeks, depending on the weather. But this creamy, dreamy zucchini chowder is such a simple recipe. And here's how to make it even better. It's corn season, or seems to be. I bought corn lately. I took half an ear of corn and I cut it was just for my bowl, and I cut it the kernels off, and that corn cob goes into my stock bag.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah. And so then I put the corn, and my sister's done this too, put the corn in the zucchini chowder, and it is so good.
Because
So
that
you can
thickens it
add
and
to
makes it
this, right?
creamier too. That thickens and makes it creamy
Well,
too.
I actually left the kernels whole because
Okay.
I wanted a little texture in there because it's a very creamy soup. And here's where my husband and I part ways. He likes his soup, well, really creamy, and I like my soup with chunks. And so I'm adding chunks and he's wanting it creamier. And this soup obviously has no dairy in it. It has all plants and it tastes great.
I
And
was just about to say, sometimes in the past, I have put in yogurt or sour cream, and this is a way to avoid that because I do need to cut down on my dairy.
yeah, so, and what I like to do, and I'm going to do after I make it on Sunday, is I like to take it and I put it in the freezer. And then when it gets to be November and I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? My freezer is like another pantry, but here's the key. You must date and label
Very true. I've
because,
learned this in the past.
yeah, because I joke about this. When you have accidentally put black beans into the morning smoothie instead of blueberries, you are not going to be so happy.
No.
So,
Well, I wanted to ask you when you've got all these soups, some of the things that you can pair them with, because in the past we might have put bread with them, but we can do other combinations that are more healthy.
well, I often, we eat salad almost every night. So we'll have a salad, and it may be that I, made something to go on the salad. Like my husband loves chickpeas on his salad. So a big salad with chickpeas is just fine with this soup.
And what
You
kind
know,
of dressing do you normally put on?
well, I make him a balsamic dressing. But I don't use dressing. I have my own little combo that I do. It is nutritional yeast, hemp hearts, which you should be eating some form of omega-3 fatty acids every day. And that's chia, flax, and hemp. But hemp is the easiest.
Okay.
And
And
so hemp hearts,
hemp hearts. Okay. I wanted you
that's
to
what they're called. And I just shake them on my salad. And then I use some really good balsamic vinegar, like it's kind of sticky almost. And then I put on one other thing, which is called ume vinegar, which is a little salty, and it's fermented. So I could use my fermented dilly bean juice instead of the ume vinegar if I want. And they sell a thing in the store called gut shots. And all that is the juice of fermented vegetables. So I tell people when you ferment your dilly beans, when you're done with the beans and you have that leftover brine, that's your gut shot and you don't have to buy it.
Oh, that's another good tip, Jill. Thank you very much for that. So we're talking soups and that are so good for the fall coming up, and we've got a lot of rain that is going to be heading our way. We hear from,
Oh,
the storm systems that have lined up for this year, but that means more mushrooms. So you were talking mushrooms and what we can
yeah.
do with those.
Yeah. And you could make, if you wanted something with your soup, you can make, well, I do a lot of batch cooking. So earlier in the week, I made a cup of quinoa, and I made it really plain so that I could do whatever I wanted with it. I turned it into quinoa tabbouleh, which was delicious and perfect for
Ooh, I
this time
love
of year.
that.
A ton of chopped up parsley, some, you could add garlic if you want. I didn't. Green onions, fresh tomatoes. You could add cucumbers, and lemon juice. And then I added,
Numbers.
yeah, my secret ingredient, which is not secret. It's called cured sumac, which is very good for you. And so that was really delicious. And then I've also I had it with some other vegetables. And you can, once I make the thing, and I make beans or lentils once or twice a week,
Because they're
um,
so good for you.
they're so good for you. And I am a taco lover. A true taco lover. So you can put anything in my taco, which is non-traditional. And I actually just got a book from somebody that I tested recipes for. It's called Tacos A to Z, and by Ivy Manning. And I tested two non-traditional tacos. One I think had zucchini and the other one had mushrooms.
I love
And
it.
mushroom and zucchini tacos would be perfect too. So I make beans once or twice a week. They could be lentils, they could be beans, and we eat them throughout the week in a variety of ways.
And how do you store them in your fridge?
I put them in a glass jar, and beans have to be used within 3 to 4 days.
Right.
And if you're not going to use them, just put them in your freezer and label them.
Label.
Because this week I was like, oh, I need more beans. I don't have any beans cooked. And I had it in a really cute little 1 cup container. And I was like, there are my beans. And so I almost always have something tucked in the freezer. So I like to pretend that somebody cooked for me, because I do all the cooking. So I'm like, oh, that person loved me so much that they made beans so I could eat my bean tacos, or
I love it.
whatever it is. They made quinoa, and here I can make quinoa salad. Or, it's just, it's kind of a practice for me to make sure that I have what I need, because when eating goes, I'll say, wrong or not in the direction you'd like, it's usually because we haven't made a plan for it.
That's a big, important thing that
Yeah.
does happen with me. I haven't made the plan, and so I use a crutch.
Well, here's one of the things. I mean, I eat, I would say 90 to 95% like just whole foods, plant foods. But, there's times when I'm like, maybe I'm not going to do it. And there's things that I will buy that I know, or maybe I'm a little not so, they're sketchy. All right. They're processed. They're not ultra processed, but they're processed. Like some of these Indian bagged foods, like
Yes,
chickpeas and whatever.
I've done that too.
Okay. But what I do is then I take that, and to it, I might add fresh green beans and fresh potatoes and more chickpeas that I've cooked myself, and onions, and just things that now I'm foofing it up, right?
You're foofing it up.
I'm foofing it up, and I might add some chopped zucchini to it, because the problem with those foods is they're calorically dense and they're not so high on the nutrition scale. But if you can take that and make it like the base and then add to it, it's not great. It's not as good as if you cooked it yourself, but excuse me, it's good enough.
So, Jill, Miss Veggie Queen, in these last few minutes, I want to ask you about the blue zones and aging well, how eating plants describe what you mean by that. What are the blue zones?
The blue zones are something that Dan Buettner just has been working on for 20 years. There's a series that just came out on Netflix. I've only watched 2, but I've known about his work for a very long time. And what he did is he found 5 places that there are more centenarians who live to 100 than anywhere else in the world. And he's looked at if you have Netflix, watch the series. It's fascinating. He's identified the things that have led to these people living longer. And it's not all food, but there is a lot about nutrition and food, because they all mostly rely on fresh food and food they've grown, and it's obviously local, because some of these places, they don't go anywhere. They only live in their community. And they actually, I think there's now 72 places. This is not in the series, or at least not the part I watched. And he just had an email this morning. There's 72 places in the US where they are now adopting blue zones information and actually reducing healthcare costs and improving health. And so it's something that can be done anywhere. My friend this morning said, we'll be blue zones. I said, I am my own little blue zone, but how it got the name was fascinating. A researcher found a place, I think it was the one in Sardinia, where he found he would plot where all the centenarians were, and it turned out he did it in blue, and that's what Dan Buettner called it, a blue zone.
I get it. All right.
And so these people live longer, they lead healthier lives. And the goal is not just to have a longer life, but to have a healthier life, and to adopt some of these blue zone patterns to make our lives healthier, because the healthier we are, the happier we are, the more we enjoy our life. And especially here where we live, where it's so beautiful. You know, we want to be able to enjoy what we have right now.
And we've got the ocean where we can get kelp.
We can get kelp. We also get mostly clean air, which is huge. You know, I teach breathing twice a week, and my friends said, I breathe 24 hours a day. I said, but not like I do. But anyway, we have everything we need here, you know, right now.
What are some of the patterns of the blue zone that you were talking about?
They don't sit around a lot. They tend to garden. They exercise, but not exercise. They just move a lot because of the activities they do. And they're eating, of course. Their communities, how close knit they are, and how they help each other. I mean, it's beautiful. It's just beautiful. And we kind of have that here, I think, but maybe not as close as they do there.
Now, we talked about the farmers markets. We've got one today up in Point Arena from 3 to 6, one in Gualala tomorrow from 9:30 to 12:30. And I've seen you there in the past when I go, and sometimes you've got a table set up. Are you doing that this time, or?
Well, you know, it's funny. I thought about doing it tomorrow, but I haven't talked to Donna yet, and I'm sure she would say, okay. But if it's kind of a dreary morning, less people come. And also, I don't know that it's kind of been cool in the mornings, and I don't know that I want to be freezing out there. But I need to do it on a non-pay and take day, which limits when I can do it.
And it is a non-pay and take day tomorrow.
Tomorrow is a non-pay and take day. And I thought about it because Keelan from Wavelength Farm said, when are you going to do that again? It was so great. And I said, well, maybe next weekend, but I'm still on the fence. It takes a bit of doing to get myself there and to prepare something that people can eat and try with all of the local farmers, because that's what I love doing, is showing off what they have. Because people were like, where did you get those mushrooms? I'm like, right down there. And they were like, oh, because, you know, we become habitual and we don't always look up.
This is an issue, Jill. That's Jill Nussinow, the Veggie Queen, a registered dietitian and freelance writer with a master's degree in nutrition and dietetics. Jill, we ran out of time already. It's the end of the hour.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope people learned a thing or three. And as I like to say, they're going to get more than they paid for.
I love it. Well, we hope to see you at the farmer's market tomorrow. And if not then before the farmer's market goes away for the year. Thanks for
Absolutely.
joining us
Thank you,
today.
Leanne.
All right. Take care. I'm Leanne Lindsey. Thanks for listening today. This is Peggy's Place on KGUA in Wallala, 88.3 FM. We are going now down to Albuquerque, New Mexico for Native America Calling for the next hour. Then we've got Q after that. This show will repeat at 1 o'clock. And it's also live on YouTube. Thanks for listening to your local public radio station. And we appreciate all donations for this independent station. It's 10 o'clock.